Fifth grade, happy Wednesday. I am so glad to be back with you all today. I am still Miss C. We are still focusing on poetry. And with poetry, our skill for this week is making inferences and drawing conclusions. What this means is kind of filling in the blanks with what the poet or the writer of the text has left for us to decide. It gives us kind of a workout as we're reading and really puts us into the story or the poem. Our goal for the day is to be able to make inferences about the poem by using clues from the text and background knowledge. Remember that our clues from the text are our evidence. We can pull these as direct quotes or paraphrase them down into just a sentence or so, kind of summarizing what we saw in the text. Our clues from the text are going to want to be really specific moments, not the whole text overall. And our background knowledge is what we've already experienced in our lives as the reader. Sometimes our background knowledge, as a fancy phrase, is called our schema. For the background knowledge part, this is what makes reading really fun because we get to be a part of the poem or the story that we're reading. Our riddle today for the warm-up gives us kind of a hint for what we are working on for the next 2 days with our one big poem. For this poem, we are going to be breaking it up into parts where I will model for you how to use the graphic organizer in order to get our inferences started today, and then you'll finish it on your own. And tomorrow we'll do the same thing with conclusions where I'll get it started and you'll finish. I'm going to give you a little under 1 minute to get our riddle started. Remember, if you are keeping track of your riddle answer, I will reveal at the very end, but this one should become clear by the end of the video. Here you go. Okay, 10 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's it. All right, save your answer for later. Our poem today is, I'll give you the answer early, has to do with the answer to the riddle. The answer to the riddle is not a softball, not a tennis ball, and if you guessed a baseball, you'd be wrong. It is a basketball. Our poem today is a sports poem, and it's a little bit different from yesterday's sports poem because it is written by a very famous and acclaimed athlete. Our poem yesterday was written by a teacher, remember? Today, our poem is written by Kobe Bryant. He wrote this poem in order to do something very specific. And as we work on it today, I want you to have that in the back of your mind, thinking, why did he write this poem? If you already know, don't spoil it for people, because some folks might already know. This poem came out in fall of 2015. So tomorrow, that is our big mystery. Why in fall of 2015 did he write this whole poem? And maybe we think about too, why did he use a poem to say what he wanted through it? I will read the whole poem one time through, and you can follow along either by seeing on my screen where I have it, or I'll also have it attached as a Google Doc that you can pull up to read to. It's the same text. Dear basketball, from the moment I started rolling my dad's tube socks and shooting imaginary game-winning shots in the Great Western Forum, I knew one thing was real. I fell in love with you. a love so deep I gave you my all. From my mind and body to my spirit and soul. As a 6-year-old boy, deeply in love with you, I never saw the end of the tunnel. I only saw myself running out of one. And so I ran. I ran up and down every court after every loose ball for you. You asked for my hustle and I gave you my heart because it came with so much more. I played through the sweat and hurt, not because challenge called me, but because you called me. I did everything for you because that's what you do when someone makes you feel as alive as you've made me feel. You gave a 6-year-old boy his Laker dream, and I'll always love you for it. But I can't love you obsessively for much longer. This season is all I have left to give. My heart can take the pounding, my mind can handle the grind, but my body knows it's time to say goodbye. And that's okay. I'm ready to let you go. I want you to know now, so we both can savor every moment we have left together, the good and the bad. We have given each other all that we have, and we both know, no matter what I do next, I'll always be that kid with the rolled up socks, garbage can in the corner, 5 seconds on the clock, ball in my hands. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Love you always, Kobe. First, as always, I want you to think about, did you like this poem? And if you did, what did you like about it? One of the things that makes this poem really special, why I like to teach it, is because it isn't written by kind of some fancy poet that we can't really identify with. If you play basketball or like sports or are interested in the news at all, you know about Kobe Bryant, and that makes this poem kind of more relatable for us. Especially if you are playing basketball as a kid or are on a sports team or a team of any kind. If you're passionate about something as a 5th grader or when you were younger, you know what it feels like to feel this way about something. As we get started, I do want you to think back to your figurative language skills. Whether you learned it in another grade, earlier this school year when you were still in your classrooms, or with Ms. Pavermo last week, I want you to think about which figurative language element is Kobe Bryant using throughout this whole poem about basketball specifically. What is the big one he's using? Think about it. 4, 3, 2. Think about it. 1. He is thinking of basketball as a person. He's treating basketball like a person. So the figurative language technique that he is using is called personification. He's writing a letter to basketball, but he's not writing a letter to a basketball. He's writing a letter to kind of basketball as a figure, a part of his life. Let's get into the inferences. Since this poem has a lot of great figurative language, there's a lot to infer about it. So I'm going to pull up the Inferences graphic organizer on one side of my screen and leave the poem on this other side. Because what we'll need to do, remember, is grab our clues from the text, which is our text evidence, put that down, connect it to our background knowledge here in the middle. Once we add those two pieces, it'll equal out to our inference. And our inference is our educated guess, the blank that the poet leaves for us to fill in. So let's start right at the beginning. Clues from the text. As we're doing this, what you want to be doing is skimming through. You don't need to get every single little line or every single stanza to be a piece of evidence for your clues section, just the parts that really stand out. What I'm about to do is skim and model using the graphic organizer to get to your inference for a little over the first half of the poem. Then later today for practice, you are going to finish the graphic organizer, just this part, for the rest of the poem. Tomorrow, we are going to get into this conclusion section at the bottom. Don't worry about this yet. We'll do that one tomorrow. So, looking just at our first stanza, right in here, we're going to skim back over. Remember, skimming is reading quickly, just kind of getting a gist, and then connect it to our background knowledge. From the moment I started rolling my dad's tube socks and shooting imaginary game-winning shots in the Great Western Forum, I knew one thing was real. So what this reminds me of is that when people don't have the, sometimes if you are in your classroom specifically and you don't have a basketball, but there is a garbage can, you just have to crumple up that paper, or you have to crumple up that tissue or whatever it is your teacher tells you to get out of your hands and throw away, and toss it in. So sometimes people will use like household or random items to pretend that it's a basketball. So I'm going to use this as my clue. My background knowledge is what I just told you. Sometimes people using the other piece about this that kind of my brain lights up to with background knowledge is game-winning shots. He isn't pretending that he's doing poorly. He isn't pretending that he is getting air balls every second. He is pretending that he is making 4-pointers, that he's getting the game-winning shots. So what the other kind of piece that we have, and this is a totally different clue, put it here, is that he is pretending that game-winning shots are hard to make, and it makes you feel good as a player to make these kinds. Let's move on to our next section. I knew one thing was real. I fell in love with you. A love so deep, I gave you my all, from my mind and my body to my spirit and my soul. So this section is keying back to my background knowledge. This section is making me think about how he is really putting everything that he has into the game. So what I am doing is copying from the poem and putting it directly into the chart, the section that I want to talk about. A love so deep, I gave you my all. So people do this with things they really care about. But part of it is that putting everything you have into something can be exhausting. If you put everything you have into studying for a test or working on a project or practicing for a big game or your instruments too at school, it can be exhausting. That becomes the thing you care about most. So you might add that too. What he cares about most. Our next section, as a 6-year-old boy deeply in love with you. I'm going to pause there because that brings into my mind that 6-year-olds usually aren't in love with anything. You can love pizza, you can love your mom, but to be in love with something is not the same as just liking it or loving it. So 6-year-olds usually are in love. And the other part too is that to be in the way that loving or liking something is different than being in love with something is that being in love is about having a relationship with that thing. So like if you love tacos, that doesn't mean you have a relationship with tacos, that you put in a lot of effort to how you feel about tacos. I know I have one student who might argue that she has this sort of in-love relationship with chicken nuggets, but usually we're not in love with things as small children. And being in love is about having relationships. That's so it's really different from just liking or loving something. If you've ever, maybe in PE or gym class, had to play a game that you liked, you know that feels different than from a game or a hobby, something that you pursue and that you love, that you really put a lot of work into. You know, too, if you, the way that you might see adults in your life, like if you think about your grandparents, and your grandparents might be in love, and that's because they have a relationship, but they might love what do grandparents love? Your grandparents might love tea. Your grandparents might love candles. But that's a different thing than being actually in love with something. It's having a kind of sort of give and take relationship, which Bryant says that he did when he was a 6-year-old with basketball. The next part he says is really interesting too. He says, I never saw the end of the tunnel. I only saw myself running out of one. For a moment, I want you to either close your eyes or start sketching on paper in front of you if you have it. If you're in a tunnel, what does it look like around you? Does it feel good to be in a tunnel? Do you feel safe if you're in a tunnel? What does it sound like? If you are, maybe you've only been in a tunnel if you are, I know at that park, or no, I know at some parks, if there is a road that crosses over, there'll be a tunnel to get under it, to cross from one side of the park to the other. Or if you've been in a tunnel while your adults at home are driving, you can think about that too. What does it sound like if you're in a tunnel? Maybe think about too, why are you in a tunnel? Okay, I'm gonna pause with that little exercise. Let's put this into our background knowledge. What do you know about tunnels? Tunnels are dark, they are passageways. We use them to go places. Point A to point B. People aren't hanging out in tunnels, or you shouldn't be. Tunnels are usually scary, or at least uncomfortable. So if Bryant says that he only sees himself running out of a tunnel, if we're running out of something, we might be escaping something. So he's getting out of the tunnel. Right here, I'm gonna put a little note that says tunnel because in this quote, it didn't say that directly. Okay, next little part. And so I ran up and down every court after every loose ball for you. You asked for my hustle and I gave you my heart because it came with so much more. This little part reminds me of how when he says that he's giving something his hustle is working really, really hard for something. And if you're giving something your heart, you are you're putting all of the care you have into it, a lot of intention into it. At this point, we are going to start looking at the inferences, and you are going to finish the graphic organizer just like we did for the rest. The rest here is stanza 6, which is this highlighted one I have up. You'll do 6, 7, 8, and then 9, and this little bottom part, I kind of think of as being a part of 9. So really just 3 or 4 stanzas that you'll do on your own, but I'm going to keep working with you on how to get to the actual inference part. So if I started, so the clue is, started rolling my dad's tube socks and shooting imaginary hoops, or imaginary game-winning shots. So just in this part, I'll add my clue from the text plus the background knowledge. And the background knowledge that I had was that sometimes people pretend to play basketball by using random items. So if I add those two things together, I infer that Kobe didn't have a basketball at first. So he used what he had around the house. The next part is about the clue, game-winning shots, plus my background knowledge, sorry. Game-winning shots are hard to make, and it makes you feel good as a player to make these kind. So he thought he was good at it, and it made him feel confident. The next part. The clue is a love so deep I gave you my all, from my mind and body to my spirit and soul, plus the background knowledge. People do this with things they really care about, but it can be exhausting. So I infer basketball was his passion in life. Next clue. As a 6-year-old boy, deeply in love with you, plus that 6-year-olds usually aren't in love with anything, and that being in love is about having a relationship with another thing or person. I infer Kobe loved or had a relationship with basketball from an unusually early age. Okay, next clue, the part about the tunnel. I only saw myself running out of one. Plus the little exercise, the background knowledge we did about tunnels. So I infer that basketball was a way for him to escape discomfort or unhappiness. Last one that we'll do together. Clue is, you asked for my hustle, I gave you my heart. Background knowledge is, hustle is working really hard for something. To give something your heart is to put in a lot of care and effort. So I infer that Kobe put in effort to his practice because he cared about it. Alrighty, at this point, I'm gonna leave you to do the remaining stanzas like we talked about. You'll do 6, 7, 8, and this last little section, stanza 9, for the graphic organizer. And then tomorrow we'll be back with this same poem. And tomorrow too, I invite you to, just to be special, wear your favorite basketball jersey or t-shirt if you have one. And then we can celebrate kind of Basketball Thursday. Alrighty, until tomorrow, at this time, I'm gonna let you get started on your practice. And I want you to remember that as a good reader, you can make inferences using text evidence and background knowledge. And remember that equation too, clues from the text plus reader knowledge equals inference. Have a great rest of your day and good luck on your practice. Don't forget to remember to wear your basketball shirt tomorrow. See you then.